remember hearing about a philosophy several years ago. I don't know if you know who Charlie Munger is, but Charlie Munger, he died last year or a year and a half or so ago. And Charlie Munger was Warren Buffett's business partner. So I think everybody knows who Warren Buffett is and that he's, this great, wealthy, smart, wise investor. But Charlie Munger kind of seemed to be more not the front-facing person. And so that's who he is, if you're not aware of who he is. And he was just super smart, obviously, and super ahead of his time. And sometimes when I hear about the things that he said or the way that he thought, I just am kind of amazed. He just really is or was a really wise person. And one of the things I remind myself all the time when I'm thinking about an investment is something that he is known to have said, and he said too hard. So when they would talk about things, they would say in, out, or too hard. And sometimes when you are an investor, and this probably goes, well, it does go in any area of business because they were stock investors, but I really think of this as a real estate investor. Just as important as the properties that you do buy are the properties that you choose not to buy. And I think your journey and your strategy very well may and probably should change as you're progressing through your investing journey. And so sometimes I think that we get excited, especially if you're a new investor, but even if you're an existing investor and you haven't been able to find a deal for a while, we jump on deals that don't necessarily make sense. And so for example, a property came on the market in my area, and it was a real fixer-upper. It was partially gutted, which is great. I mean, that's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for good deals. It was priced accordingly. And I went and walked through this property, and I'm kind of walking through this property thinking, okay, so it currently, I walk up, I see 2 front doors, I see a bunch of mailboxes. So it's been a multifamily property. The problem with that is there's no parking, which is fine because in my town, we're a pretty small town. It's not like a big city where if there's no parking, there's nowhere to park. You're just going to have to kind of park and walk, or there's going to be a lot of cars around this area. And I thought, I'm walking through this and I go, you know what? This property might make sense if I just converted it back to a single family home and sold it as a flip. But I'm walking and I'm walking through this property, kind of mapping it out. And then I get to the back where there used to be a garage, and I go, perfect, there used to be a garage here. I can convert this back to a garage. I can do a good size single family property in front. This might be a decent flip. Just get rid of all these separated units. I don't know how many units this place used to be, but they had clearly been packing units into this place like sardines. So there were doors everywhere, but everything was torn apart. So you couldn't see exactly where the walls had been and how it had been laid out. I mean, it's completely not been lived in for a while. And I look at this key that is to the back garage, and it says unit 6. And I open a unit and I'm like, oh, this is actually one of the better ones. So the back garage has a full 1-bedroom unit. And then I open another door and there's coin-operated laundry. And then I open another door on another part of the garage, which is another 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom. But it was really like you had to step up to get into the bathtub, because if you're not familiar, when people don't want to jackhammer out the concrete to do the P-trap that goes under a plumbing setup, then they'll raise it up. So that's why you see showers, tubs, toilets that look like they're on a step and a throne, is because people don't want to jackhammer down. So they had done that with the tub. And I'm walking through this place. I find the garage had been converted into 2 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom units, which were actually the most livable units in the place at the time, which I would not rent them out, but I'm sure somebody was. And then coin-operated laundry, and then I don't know how many units, but I'm guessing at least 4 at one time in the house, because if the back 2 units are 5 and 6. And I'm just thinking, well, heck, I mean, before I was thinking of converting it back to a 1-bedroom or a single family home, but then I'm thinking of pulling out of this plumbing and capping this all off. And is the plumbing that they put in the garage connected to the plumbing that they put in the house originally, or are those on different lines because it's in an older area? So sometimes that plumbing goes into the alley, sometimes that plumbing goes into the front street. really someone had split this up and packed a ton of stuff into here, and it was trash. I mean, there was no way you could use it for what it was. It wasn't like this is a 6 unit that makes any sense. And so I, at first, was even sending pictures to my husband. I was like, oh, this just came on the market. And then I was like, oh, yeah, probably not, after I saw the garage. And I always remember when I walk through a property like this, too hard. And for the price point, it looks really exciting because it's under $60,000, but for what you would have to do, and then of course the roofs and the siding and all that, all those pieces too. There's so many things before you even get inside. Rewire, replumb, separate all these units out, figure out what's going on. I remember these words from Charlie Munger and in his wisdom, too hard. And the amount of time that it would take me for the return on that huge, ginormous project versus just waiting for one that probably costs a little bit more, but is going to be quicker to rehab and also less work, meaning myself and the subs and the trades that I have to manage. Listen, there's a price for everything, right? Too hard for a certain price makes sense, but somebody's going to buy that at that price and make it work. And it makes me think, when I did the first purchase I bought to be a flip, I bought a $45,000 house because that's what I could afford. And I had to be able to buy it in cash. I didn't really know a lot about hard money lending, didn't have relationships with hard money lenders. So I knew I had to have, I didn't know what I know now. I thought I needed to have the cash to buy the property and also to rehab the property. So I was being really conservative, and I wasn't valuing my time because I could do the work for free. So I didn't have a lot of money, but I was willing to put in the time. And so I picked a really difficult property, but I was going to win because of the labor I was going to put in. So I bought a house for $45,000. We put the money into it that we had to, but I knew the labor was going to be free. Now, as I have moved along on my investing journey, I don't want to I will do labor. I like to do the finish work. I like to do the tile. I like to do the flooring, the trim, all that type of stuff. But I don't want to be the person changing the framing. I don't want to be the person moving the ductwork. And so a job like that, where so much of that stuff needed to be moved and done, there's a huge labor expenditure that we'd be putting back into that property. And it's something that I probably would have bought as my first flip or early on because it was in my budget and something I could have done. But now, looking at the opportunity cost of the time, one, the time to do the work, but two, the time of how long the project would take just because of the scope, I just realized this is not the one. And so I think it's just smart to think about that. And now I know about borrowing money and hard money and bank loans and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people in the investing world are way ahead of me on that and borrowing from hard money lenders. But you really do have to think about that when you buy. Some things, and I'm not saying too hard, like don't do the work. You're not going to succeed if you're not willing to do the work. But some things are so complicated of projects, they are not worth, like the return you're going to get and the opportunity cost of being able to be doing another project, whether with your time or with your money. Now, if you have a system down, you're super wealthy, or you have a lot of lenders where maybe, or a crew and a team where you're doing 5, 6, 7 projects at a time, and this is just something that's going while other things are going, then maybe this isn't as much of the conversation. But for me, where I'm very involved as a general contractor, I'm self-performing a lot of my tasks on my renovations, to be on this job site for as long as it would have taken and to manage the weirdness of it, I'm saying at this price because if they drop it, maybe I'll take a second look at it, but didn't and doesn't make sense for me. And so I encourage you, when you think about the deals that you are considering buying or considering investing in, to think about, is this too hard? Not like I'm not willing to do the work, but does this make sense for where I'm at in my investing journey? And maybe this made sense before, but it doesn't make sense now. Or maybe it does make sense now, but in 5 years, this is not going to make sense. And not to say too hard, like I'm not willing to put in the work, because you have to put in the work. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not willing to put in the work. But is this the best use of my time, money, and energy? So like Charlie Munger said, think about too hard. Is this worth buying or is this not worth buying? And I think it's a good thing to remember, because now when I walk through properties, I actually say this to myself all the time. And I think it's really saved me from deals that just were not the best deal for me at that time.